The boardroom of Sterling Motors looked more like the stage of a theater than the nerve center of a billion-dollar empire. Walls of glass reflected the Silicon Valley skyline, sleek chrome fixtures gleamed under carefully placed lighting, and a prototype engine worth $2 million sat proudly on the conference table like a crown jewel. Except at this moment that jewel was cracked. For weeks, the machine had refused to work properly, stalling every attempt to prove that Sterling Motors could lead the autonomous vehicle revolution. At the head of the table stood Victoria Sterling, founder and CEO, a woman celebrated in glossy magazines as the face of modern innovation. She wore her power like armor, perfectly tailored suits, diamond bracelets that sparkled like weapons, and a voice sharp enough to cut through steel. Yet beneath the curated polish was a growing desperation. The engine crisis had already delayed contracts worth tens of millions, and investors from Europe were arriving within days. Failure was not an option, not for someone who had clawed her way to the top by mocking, crushing, and discarding anyone who stood in her way. Into this high-stakes theater walked Jamal Carter, pushing a maintenance cart stacked with trash bags and cleaning supplies. His dark blue coveralls bore the company logo, but everyone in the room knew he wasn't truly considered part of Sterling Motors. To executives earning six-figure salaries, he was furniture that moved, a janitor tasked with emptying bins and wiping fingerprints from glass doors. Victoria's eyes flicked to him, and in that moment, her contempt became entertainment. She gestured at the silent machine with the manicured precision of someone presenting a joke. "Perhaps our janitor can fix what MIT engineers could not," she sneered, her words dripping with venom disguised as charm. Her audience of executives chuckled nervously, afraid to look amused but more afraid to remain stone-faced. Then came the sentence that would change everything. "Fix this engine, and I'll marry you," she mocked, her smile stretching like a knife. "But when you fail, and you will, security will escort you out permanently." The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It echoed through the sterile boardroom like a verdict. Jamal stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of every dismissive glance pressing on his shoulders. But where the executives saw a humiliated janitor, Jamal felt something different stirring within him. He had seen this engine before. He had studied its blueprints late at night when forgotten documents lay scattered across tables he cleaned, and he recognized the signs of a problem no one else seemed willing to hear. Yet silence had been his shield in this company. For 3 years, he had survived by being invisible, by swallowing pride and enduring insults that reduced his title of technical consultant into the cruel nickname of the cleaning guy. To speak now would be to step into the lion's den. But something about Victoria's mockery struck too deep. It reminded him of another voice, long ago in a Detroit garage, when his grandfather taught him to listen to the heartbeat of machines. Engines, Samuel Carter had said, don't lie. They tell their truth to anyone willing to hear it. As the executives returned their attention to their failing prototype, Jamal quietly emptied the trash can beside the conference table. But inside, a decision was forming, one that would carry him from invisibility into the center of a story no one in that room could have imagined. The stage was set, the challenge issued, and the mockery sealed in memory. What Victoria thought was a joke would soon become the test of a lifetime, for both of them. Long before Jamal Carter ever pushed a mop across Sterling Motors' gleaming floors, he had lived in a very different world. Detroit in the mid-1990s was a city in decline, its factories bleeding jobs and neighborhoods scarred by shuttered plants. Yet in a small garage on 8 Mile Road, engines still sang their mechanical hymns under the hands of Samuel Carter, Jamal's grandfather. Samuel had been one of the first black foremen at Ford Motor Company in the 1970s. A trailblazer who earned respect in an industry that tested him twice as hard as his white peers. His name carried quiet reverence among men who had seen him resurrect machines that others had pronounced dead. And in that cramped garage, beneath posters of classic Mustangs and the smell of oil-soaked rags, he passed on his philosophy to his grandson. "Engines speak," Samuel would say, guiding young Jamal's hand to rest on a running motor. "You just have to listen. Feel the rhythm, the vibration, the heartbeat. They'll never lie to you." While other children spent summers chasing basketballs or video games, Jamal learned to diagnose engines through sound, smell, and instinct. A faint knocking told him about worn bearings. A whiff of burnt oil whispered of hidden leaks. By the time he was 16, he could tear down and rebuild an entire V8 blindfolded. What textbooks took years to explain, Jamal absorbed in days by listening to machines that spoke a language he understood as fluently as his own breath. Samuel's lessons extended beyond mechanics. He warned his grandson of the world's harsher truths. "They'll look at your skin before they look at your skill," he said. "You'll have to prove yourself twice, and even then, they'll doubt you. But engines don't care. Engines don't see color. Fix what others can't, and even the arrogant will bow to the truth." When Samuel died of a sudden heart attack under the hood of a Cadillac, Jamal was still in high school. The funeral overflowed with mechanics, engineers, and customers who spoke of the man's genius and his integrity. Yet what Samuel left Jamal was not wealth but wisdom, a set of instincts honed through decades of listening to machines others had given up on. Jamal carried those lessons into community college, where professors quickly noticed his extraordinary grasp of mechanical systems. One former MIT instructor told him bluntly, "You think like an engineer with 20 years of experience. You belong at Stanford or MIT, not here." But the reality of life was harsher than academic praise. When Jamal's mother was diagnosed with breast cancer during his sophomore year, everything changed. Tuition dreams evaporated beneath the crushing weight of medical bills. The chemotherapy cost thousands each month, insurance covered only part, and Jamal became both provider and caregiver. He worked 3 jobs: gas station clerk, parts shop assistant, and janitor, all while finishing his associate degree in mechanical engineering. His grades remained flawless despite the exhaustion that carved shadows under his eyes. Transfer applications to 4-year universities sat untouched in a folder labeled "Someday," a cruel reminder of opportunities postponed by responsibility. In the end, he took what work he could find. A staffing agency placed him at Sterling Motors under the inflated title of technical consultant. The reality was cleaning floors, hauling trash, and occasionally tinkering with equipment too minor for the official engineering staff. For 3 years, he endured the humiliation of being invisible, of hearing executives call him the cleaning guy, as though the degree hanging in his small apartment were nothing more than a decoration. Yet invisibility gave him something valuable: time. Late at night, after the executives had left their meetings, Jamal lingered over forgotten blueprints and technical documents. He studied, memorized, and quietly pieced together the secrets of the very machines that baffled Ivy League graduates. He took online courses in artificial intelligence, read technical journals cover to cover, and turned his tiny apartment into a laboratory of salvaged engine parts and half-finished experiments. To the world, he was a janitor, but in truth, he was sharpening skills no one could see. And so when Victoria Sterling mocked him in the boardroom, dismissing his presence as the punchline of a cruel joke, Jamal felt something deeper than humiliation. He felt the echo of his grandfather's voice, steady and certain. "Engines don't lie. Listen to them, and they'll tell you the truth others can't hear." The irony was sharp. The executives with their elite degrees and bloated salaries had stared at diagnostic codes for 6 weeks without progress. Jamal, the man mocked as a janitor, already suspected what was wrong. He'd seen the mismatch between the German-made components and the American software calibrations. He'd noticed the subtle vibrations no one else paid attention to. But knowledge was not enough. Speaking up meant risking everything: his job, his dignity, perhaps even the fragile stability of his mother's medical care. And yet the challenge had been thrown down in front of 200 employees, with Victoria's scorn echoing in the air. It was no longer just about an engine. It was about respect, about dignity, about proving that a man's worth could not be measured by the uniform he wore. The memory of Samuel's words hardened inside Jamal like steel. When you fix what others can't, suddenly your color, your title, your lack of credentials, none of that matters. All that matters is the truth. And so, with the eyes of the company, and soon the world, upon him, Jamal decided he would take the risk. If the engine wanted to speak, then he would be its translator. The following morning, Sterling Motors resembled less a company headquarters than a stage set for a high-stakes drama. Word of Victoria Sterling's wager had spread like wildfire. What she had meant as a cruel joke now became the spectacle everyone wanted to witness. Employees whispered in corridors, emails buzzed with speculation, and even rival firms had caught wind of the story through insider leaks. By noon, 200 employees crammed into the company's main auditorium. The air pulsed with tension, the kind of electric anticipation that precedes either triumph or disaster. At the front row sat the German investors, stern men in tailored suits, led by Klaus Reinhardt, a man whose reputation for precision was legendary. A deal worth €100 million rested on their evaluation of Sterling's technology. And to their side sat Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former Tesla engineer known in the industry as the Oracle of automotive design. Her presence alone turned this from a corporate embarrassment into an engineering trial by fire. Victoria Sterling took the stage, her heels clicking against polished wood with theatrical precision. She addressed the crowd with that same cold smile that had mocked Jamal in the boardroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing through the speakers. "We face an unprecedented challenge. Our revolutionary engine, the crown jewel of Sterling Motors, has refused to cooperate. Our brightest minds have labored without success. But today," she paused, savoring the moment like a predator circling prey. "Today, one of our own has volunteered to attempt the impossible." All eyes turned toward the back of the auditorium, where Jamal stood by the exit doors. His maintenance uniform looked painfully out of place amid the sea of designer suits and polished shoes. For the first time in his life at Sterling Motors, every head turned to him. The janitor who had been invisible was suddenly the center of attention. Victoria's tone dripped with venom disguised as encouragement. "Jamal Carter, the man who keeps our halls clean, believes he can fix what our MIT and Harvard engineers could not. And so, before you all, and before our esteemed guests from Europe, he will have his chance." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some smirked, others shook their heads in disbelief. Most expected humiliation. 2 security guards flanked the stage, their posture unmistakable. If Jamal failed, he would not leave this building as an employee. Victoria had made the stakes very clear. Success would earn him an impossible promotion. Failure would brand him a fool forever, barred from every tech company in Silicon Valley. But what Victoria had not counted on was Dr. Vasquez. The seasoned engineer rose from her seat, her presence commanding silence in an instant. "I will act as a technical witness," she declared firmly. "This evaluation must be conducted fairly, and the results measured objectively." Her tone left no room for argument. Victoria faltered but quickly masked her irritation. Cameras were already rolling, a live broadcast streamed across the company's social media platforms, with hashtags like #SterlingChallenge and #JanitorVersusEngine exploding across Twitter and LinkedIn. What had begun as internal mockery was now a viral event watched by thousands. The procession moved to the executive boardroom, now transformed into a stage of judgment. The engine sat on the polished conference table like an idol, surrounded by diagnostic equipment and laptops that had displayed the same mocking error code for 6 long weeks. Employees pressed against the glass walls, craning to see. The German investors settled into leather chairs, their expressions unreadable, their pens ready. Jamal approached the machine with a reverence that contrasted sharply with Victoria's theatrics. He laid his hands gently on the cold steel, closed his eyes and listened. To the crowd, it looked like a meaningless gesture. To him, it was the beginning of a conversation. For 30 silent seconds, nothing happened. Skeptical whispers filled the room. Executives smirked. Victoria's smile widened. But inside Jamal's mind, the engine was already speaking. Its rhythm strained, its frequencies clashing, its voice begging to be heard. When he finally opened his eyes, his voice was steady, carrying across the room with quiet certainty. "This engine isn't broken," he said. "It's fighting against itself." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Executives exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes. Yet in the front row, Klaus Reinhardt leaned forward for the first time, interest flickering across his usually stoic face. Dr. Vasquez scribbled notes with rapid precision. Jamal pointed to the diagnostic screens. The components were manufactured in Munich to metric standards. But the calibration software was written here in imperial measurements. They don't align. It's like an orchestra playing in two different keys. No matter how skilled the musicians, the result will always be chaos. Gasps rippled through the room. Executives who had spent sleepless weeks chasing phantom software errors now recognized the truth in his words. Their faces flushed with shame and disbelief. Victoria's expression faltered. For the first time, her mask of confidence cracked. She had expected a stumble, not a coherent diagnosis delivered with the authority of someone who had spent his life listening to engines whisper their secrets. Jamal continued, moving with quiet confidence as he pulled out a simple component from